Story 1. Getting lost is an underrated experience that has been overlooked by future generations. Without smartphones and GPS in our cars, it was enjoyable to take a random exit on the highway and find our way back home. Walking around, we would take a random pathway and see where it led us. Without a phone to provide the exact ending to our journey, we had to discover it for ourselves. I remember driving for hours after school with my high school friends, completely lost and trying to find our way home. We talked about life, the future, and growing up. If we found furniture on the side of the road, we would grab it and argue over who got to sit in it. We made constant stops to get out and explore. It was an irreplaceable activity. I genuinely feel sorry for kids today because it's not the same when you know you have a direct route back home. The thrill of not knowing was amazing. Story 2. I rode my bike everywhere, and my parents had a vague idea of where I was. I took trips to the record store and copied records to tape. I hung out with a friend who had a PlayStation 1 and FIFA 96. I smoked in the local park and read a lot. Story 3. Rode our bikes everywhere. Built and launched model rockets. Played video games with friends. Enjoyed a variety of blue raspberry-flavored snacks. Story 4. I spent most of my younger teen years riding my bike around and trying to find my friends, usually by spotting a house with the most bicycles out front. Activities like playing video games on consoles such as Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, and PlayStation were common. I became very passionate about music as well, building a sizable CD collection throughout middle and high school, and learning to play the guitar and drums. Jamming with a few other guys when we were bored was a regular occurrence. I played a lot of pickup basketball, baseball, and volleyball games. If I could get a ride, going to the mall about 15 miles away was always a treat. Later on, after getting my driver's license, I spent a lot of time hanging out at my friends' houses, attending house parties, and smoking marijuana in the woods. My area also had a vibrant music scene with a coffee shop and pizza joint that offered free or $1 shows every Friday and Saturday night. Story 5. We had so much fun. We had America Online Instant Messenger, which provided just enough internet when I was in high school, allowing us a way to communicate and plan. However, nobody spent all day on their dad's 386 computer. Gas was cheap, so we would fill up my SUV and ride around listening to CDs we burned off LimeWire. We would just go to the mall, visit Best Buy, and go to Galleons, which was the precursor to Dick's Sporting Goods. Story 6. Hang out with friends. I cannot believe how difficult it is for young people to understand that socializing in person is much more enjoyable than socializing online. Story 7. Parties were different from what you see on TV, where there is constant drug use and bedroom activities. We used to gather a few friends and drive to a campsite in the woods to settle in for the night. We would have drinks and cook hot dogs over the fire. The only sources of light were candles and the fire itself, along with the light from our dad's all-terrain vehicles. At camper parties, we would play Nintendo 64 and snack on chips while enjoying a few beers. Story 8. I believe I read at least 2,000 books before I turned 18. It's a rough estimate, but it should be close. I read around 300 pages each evening and over 1,000 on a free day, or more if it was a page-turner. I still average about a page per minute for most novels. Story 9. I spent my entire childhood outside as long as the sun was up. I would ride my bike across town to my friend's house, and then we would ride around together to different parks or to the fast food restaurant across from school for ice cream. It is often seen as a joke, but I was not allowed inside during the summer if the sun was up. My parents would leave for work, and right after breakfast, I would leave the house and spend the day hanging out with friends. I had to be home by the time the streetlights came on, which was my only real rule. Story 10. I went to the mall, skateboard, and listened to records with friends. I made clothing like huge pants. I went to concerts and watched music videos with friends. We drove around in our cars filled with friends, not caring about the destination. I was born in 1977, so I was 13 in 1990. What a great time to be alive. I really miss it. Now at 46, life can be difficult. Story 11. I went to my local creek in the woods and played with fire. Looking back, it was not the brightest idea, but it certainly occupied a lot of my time. I also inflated some floatables and drifted down the creek with the current. Story 12. Video games, playing in the woods, walking miles to the store, sports, martial arts, and having fun. Story 13. I grew up in a small town surrounded by forest and ocean. We had a small cabin built with wood and materials we scavenged from people in town. It sat in the bush just off the water. On the weekends, everyone, all 12 of us, would hang out there, have a bonfire, barbecue, and drink. We all had trikes, quads, or dirt bikes. Back then, you could buy them used for $500. There were hundreds of kilometers of trails, logging roads, and mining roads that were no longer in use where we would ride. We also spent a lot of time hunting and fishing. We would sit around and talk about how boring it was and how we couldn't wait to leave. Now, I would give anything to go back in time and relive those years. Story 14. In my early teens, I rode my bike around the neighborhood and played in the nearby woods and creek. In my late teens, I drove around with friends, listened to music, visited retail stores such as electronics and toy stores, and hung out at fast food restaurants. Story 15. I spent all day in comic book stores, usually playing Magic: The Gathering. I rode my bike around town or to the store for junk food. I built tree forts in the undeveloped properties near our house. I went to the movies with friends whenever we had money. I spent the day in coffee shops in Washington State. I cruised around town listening to metal. On weekends, I attended local area network parties, staying up all night playing StarCraft, Quake 2, or whatever the game of the season was. Story 16. We spent time at coffee shops, played sports and games, drove around, attended parties and concerts, explored food options, visited the mall, headed downtown to specialty record shops, enjoyed amusement parks, and participated in events and nightclubs. Sometimes we went to clubs and bars that did not check identification. I did not have a curfew, and some of my friends did not have one either, so we stayed out late. Story 17. I watched music videos and sports, played video games, and had many sleepovers. I went to the movies or rented films, visited the mall or arcade, played basketball, drew, read, and listened to a lot of music. I rode my bike and explored the woods, drove around, and spent time with friends. We talked about relationships, dated, and navigated challenges with my parents. Story 18. Between the summer of 9th and 10th grade, I spent every day at a pool with a new friend and a group of guys, along with a few girls. We smoked marijuana all day and swam, which explained our red eyes. As summer ended, we all went to try out for sports teams. I ran the 40-yard dash, and the coach, who had known me for 3 years, told me he messed up the time and that I needed to run it again. When I did, he asked, "What happened to you? You can't run that fast." As 10th graders, I believe all of us who tried out for sports made the varsity team. It wasn't until our early 20s that we realized we had inadvertently gotten into the best shape of our lives by getting high, swimming, and playing silly water games to impress the girls. I also distinctly recall my dad giving me and a couple of friends a talk about how marijuana isn't like it used to be. It's much more potent these days. Back in 1996, the marijuana was often compressed and full of stems and seeds. It was an amazing find if we could get high-quality buds. I actually gave that same speech to myself recently when offered a gummy. I took a tiny lick and was sent off to outer space. Story 19. I was a kid in the 1990s, not a teenager yet, but I rode my bike around to friends' houses and tried to organize street hockey games. I played PlayStation games like Twisted Metal and Tekken, and I collected Pokemon cards. When I was a little younger, I enjoyed squirt guns and yo-yos. We played a lot of tag and hide and seek. Story 20. Play outside. We used to play a game called 90s versus 80s and fight each other along with a lot of tag, pick-up basketball, and some Yu-Gi-Oh! Story 21. Went to the mall, spent the day at the lake, rode bikes, or walked while our parents did not know where we were for hours. Countless hours trying to record our favorite songs off the radio. Let's not forget about the number of prank phone calls we made. Story 22. There was a lot of wandering and discovering. We would go out and see what happened, stop by friends' houses, shoot basketball, and play baseball if we could gather enough people. Sometimes we would smoke cannabis if we had it, take our parents' liquor, and sit around talking. Music was significant in the 1990s, so there were many discussions about songs and album meanings. We had great adventures just going out without a plan and seeing what unfolded. It usually started with a phone call asking, "Want to hang out?" And maybe some other kids would join us. Sometimes it turned into fun times, while other times it was just relaxing and having conversations. Felt like there was more interaction back then, with more spontaneous events. It was enjoyable. Story 23. Spent $4 on helium balloons at the grocery store, inhale them, and then faint in front of the store. Additionally, bikes. Story 24. I graduated high school in 1992. You would call your friends on your cordless phone at their homes and then hang out. After moving out in 1992, I spent a lot of time at a cafe playing games and trying to meet people. Back then, before laptops, people would just spend the night in cafes smoking cigarettes and chatting. I would often find myself getting into all sorts of random situations. Story 25. Played outside, rode bikes, played video games, downloaded music and videos from the internet, watched cable television and VHS tapes, and chatted online. The good old days. Story 26. I spent most of my time gaming, listening to music, and cycling. Living in a seaside town, we often spent our summers at the beach, which eventually led to underage drinking among teenagers. The local police did not mind as long as we stayed away from the town. This tradition was also embraced by my parents during their teenage years, and I believe it continues to this day. Story 27. We went outside to the movies and to the park, spending time together while trying to meet girls and obtain alcohol. Story 28. I played cricket in 48 degrees Celsius. I got hurt and came home bleeding because I dived in a field full of stones. My mom's reaction was, again, I went and got a tetanus injection and then went to sleep after dinner. Story 29. This will be UK-centric. Playing football outside all day long, enjoying tennis during the 2 weeks of Wimbledon, participating in PlayStation games with 4 friends, going to the cinema and trying to sneak into 15-rated films when 13 or 14 years old, or 18-rated films while 16 or 17, often settling disappointingly for something that was rated PG, playing Laser Quest and bowling, being a nuisance with fireworks in the month before Guy Fawkes Night, and being a general nuisance for the rest of the year. Story 30. I talked to real friends instead of imaginary ones. I listened to music and visited the mall, where I met real girls and showed them what it means to be a real man, guiding their decisions based on actions rather than misinformation found online. I made new friends from other cities instead of relying on fake online connections that may not even be genuine. I learned valuable lessons in school and also during our parties, which took place in the woods or on farms where we could be loud and carefree. We sometimes visited friends' houses where the parents supported our fun, telling the authorities to leave us alone as we enjoyed ourselves responsibly. We lost our virginities in safe environments, free from pressure to conform to societal expectations. We rode bikes to our destinations, ensuring we stayed active and worked hard to achieve our goals. Video games were part of our lives, and we played them all night on weekends after completing our homework. All parents knew each other's children, so they could keep an eye on us without involving authorities, because we were not troublemakers who ran off when teased. We learned to fight, to ignore negativity, and to earn respect without needing validation on social media. When we did engage in fights, we faced the consequences but always returned home afterward. We stayed away from violence involving weapons. Story 31. Anything you could think of doing outside, such as bike riding, playing basketball at the playground, and football, along with enjoying some recreational activities. Story 32. Go skate in the streets, drive around, watch music videos, go to a river, listen to music, and maybe play basketball or soccer. Some friends would spend their time trying to get cigarettes, marijuana, or alcohol. Those were simple times. Story 33. We drove around and listened to music a lot. Live sporting events were significant. Going to the movies was a big part of my life. I used to watch around 10 movies each month, and they were mostly enjoyable. Now, I only see about 5 a year. Story 34. I biked everywhere, played Super Nintendo and N64, and had adventures in the woods, going wherever the day took me. It was a great time with no social media or cell phones in sight. Now that I have kids, it's crazy how different it is. My parents would drop me off at a local festival or mall with my friends, hand me $10 to $20, and say see you in 6 hours or whatever. I would never leave my kids alone at places like that today. Story 35. Riding bikes, climbing trees, making forts, and enjoying music. We also smoked a lot of cigarettes, used THC, and had parties in the woods. Story 36. My friends and I would ride our bikes around the neighborhood for hours, from about 10 a.m. until 6 p.m. We built forts in the bushes to hang out, eat snacks, ride around some more, and then go home. We did this for years until we all got a PlayStation 1 or Nintendo 64. Then we spent hours playing Tony Hawk or GoldenEye. Story 37. Ride bikes, watch television, learn to ride rollerblades for a short time, interact with people in person, talk on the phone, meet people at the mall, play organized sports, play casual sports, devised ways to enjoy activities discreetly, drove around town listening to music, brainstormed fun ideas to do with friends, and shot hoops in the driveway. Story 38. A few weeks ago, we lost power for 2 days, and I stayed with my best friend from childhood. We read books, completed jigsaw puzzles, played cribbage, and chatted on the couch. It was the best time ever, and we kept saying, "This is what we did in the 90s. Story 39. I rode my bike everywhere, explored the town, and spent time at parks at night. I sneaked out at 2 or 3 a.m. to meet girls or crash parties we weren't invited to for free drinks while pretending to fit in. We also spent a lot of time hanging out at each other's houses playing video games. Story 40. I didn't have much free time between helping with my younger siblings, managing the house, and working a part-time job, but I loved riding my bike each day if the weather was decent. I stayed home and played music, drew, and read novels. I would play a current song on the piano, and my older sister and I would create humorous lyrics. Story 41. Only one of two things: acting foolish and getting drunk with friends, or sitting around and watching television when nothing is on. Story 42. Play The Sims on my computer, chat with my friends online, talk to strangers in chat rooms, talk on the phone, write to pen pals, read RL. Stein books, watch movies on VHS, rent movies on VHS, watch TV shows recorded on VHS, create websites about myself to share with my friends, and listen to CDs. It was a strange time. Story 43. I rode my bike and went to the movies. I played Nintendo 64 games with friends, read books, and watched television. That covers most of it. Story 44. In 1996, when I could drive, it was an exciting time. We were the last in my small town to cruise back and forth down a mile section, waving, honking, and shouting every night until around 10 p.m. People would jump into different cars and hang out in parking lots, basically doing anything to avoid being at home. We also enjoyed bikes, skating, and playing video games. Many of the experiences I read about resonate with me. Story 45. Ride bikes and explore the woodlands between neighborhoods. Paintball was considered an expensive hobby at our age. We swam at the community beach and took the summer school bus to Seaside Heights Beach. We played split-screen Halo and had LAN parties. We used LimeWire to download music, caught crabs using chicken parts on a line, and dug holes to China. We played Don't Let the Balls Touch You on the trampoline, burned things with a magnifying glass, set Hot Wheels cars on fire, and lit fireworks in the woods. We went dumpster diving and occasionally explored in the woods. We played baseball at the community park and often had parties at family friends' pools. Story 46. I played video games, went hunting and fishing, read books, and drove around town with no particular destination. I also went to work. Story 47. I played pickup basketball and football, swam in my grandmother's pool, rode bikes as a teenager, and then drove around randomly as I got older. I enjoyed playing video games on the Nintendo Entertainment System and Sega Genesis. I attended parties in the woods or at homes when parents were out, played golf, participated in summer league baseball, and visited the mall. I also went to Southeastern Conference football games with my dad and grandfather on fall Saturdays, and I made mixtapes of songs from the radio. Story 48. We ran pre-internet electronic bulletin board systems, which were similar to the internet but required dial-in access with local users only, such as students and local computer enthusiasts. We also hosted some pirated software. Additionally, we had a band and recorded some songs using a 4-track. We rented videos, made copies, and traded for our video games, buying one a year while copying hundreds. Our rooms were filled with photocopied maps and codes. Story 49. Gaming, drawing, painting, reading books and comics, visiting the library, cycling, parkour, spending time with friends, using the computer, and studying. Story 50. A young person in the South worries about nuclear destruction, drives around, drinks beer, smokes cannabis, goes camping, protests against the war, joins the Marines and fights in the conflict, discusses racism and the Los Angeles riots, attends concerts for bands like Jane's Addiction, Red Hot Chili Peppers, or the Allman Brothers, engages in sexual relationships, wishes for more intimacy, watches old adult films on tape, finds magazines, inhales correction fluid, worries about HIV/AIDS, fears crack cocaine, obtains a fake identification, smokes or chooses not to smoke cigarettes while holding a sanctimonious view, recycles, watches Spike Lee films and becomes socially aware without anyone suggesting that caring is weak or political, enjoys Clint Eastwood movies without anyone implying that wanting to eliminate villains is psychotic or political, buys Ray-Ban or Vuarnet sunglasses or their replicas, purchases Benetton clothing or counterfeit items, plays sports, plays video games, reads, hunts, fishes, visits the mall to hang out, listens to music, hikes, kayaks, water skis, eats, dates, rock climbs, customizes their car, toilets paper houses, attends house parties, watches shows like Beavis and Butt-Head while thinking the characters are immature, views movies on cable or in theaters, watches music television, is astounded by the controversial lyrics of Prince's Purple Rain, visits a museum, watches sports, begs for the transparent Swatch watch, chats on online forums, goes boating, enjoys the beach, and visits theme parks. Story 51. Before we could drive, we played many sports around the neighborhood, rode bikes, and caught animals near the creeks and ponds. After we learned to drive, we visited each other's houses, played card games, socialized, and continued to play sports. During this time, we also encountered some trouble and explored our relationships with girls. Story 52. As a kid, I rode my bike everywhere. I loved going to the convenience store to buy fountain sodas with free refills, which were about 25 ounces, and a candy bar. After that, we would buy a few comic books and read them at our house. Arcades were popular during that time, but we also spent a lot of time playing Nintendo Entertainment System and Sega Genesis. I enjoyed activities like surfing, hiking in the woods, walking on the beach, and visiting each other's houses to hang out. I was really into painting, drawing, and art in general as well. Story 53. We are outside. There were mixers, youth group activities at churches, recreation centers, and, of course, the mall. Sometimes you gather your neighborhood friends and walk around, and something will catch your interest. Story 54. Listen to music. Talk on the phone, watch movies, play video games, spend time with friends in your room, hang out at the mall, go to see inexpensive movies. Story 55. Ride around on the bike, practice sports, play soccer with the other kids in the neighborhood, explore the woods in a Huckleberry Finn style, play video games, and hang out at friends' places. I also played Dungeons and Dragons once in a while. Story 56. After-school activities include sports, riding motorbikes, learning to code, and creating trails in the woods for motorbikes. Story 57. I'm a 38-year-old who experienced the end of the 90s in a fairly decent-sized town in Illinois. In my hometown, there was a lot of hanging out uptown during the spring and summer. Back then, you could start hanging out in about 6th grade, and parents didn't worry about it. The middle schoolers would usually go to late movies and walk home. High schoolers would cruise around, typically making their way back uptown. The parking lot at JCPenney was quite popular. There was a lot of throwing frisbees and similar activities. The police station wasn't too far away, so we knew not to get too rowdy. Fighting was a definite no-go there. We did fight a lot, though, and had a dedicated spot for it across town in the woods by the YMCA. Surprisingly, we were quite civil about everything, and nothing ever got out of hand. I think the worst I saw was a chipped tooth and some black eyes. There was a lot of sneaking out. My friends and I played pranks on the police, doing silly things like lining up trash cans to block off the main street and setting off fireworks at 3 a.m. We got chased by the police quite a bit but never got caught. Sneaking out for a romantic rendezvous was very common. I sneaked out during rain and snowstorms. I nearly got caught by a dad more than once. Oh, and there was a lot of swimming at the lake during the summer. Story 58. Market wrench political mourn close crush mindless versed fanatical oatmeal. Story 59. Annie and everything. Started driving at 15. A lot of socializing, sports, and parties. Story 60. Go to local punk shows, smoke cannabis, drink, skateboard, and just hang out. If someone's parents were out of town, there was usually a party. Nobody had mobile phones, so everything was communicated verbally. We used to hang out near a spot that had a payphone, and our friends would call to see what everyone was doing. Story 61. In the early 1990s, I took many hikes in the hills and spent a lot of time in the forest and by the creek. I also did a significant amount of reading. In the late 1990s, I continued to explore the hills and go hiking frequently, but I was under the influence of drugs. Story 62. Play sports or participate in other physical activities, such as martial arts, read books, watch television or movies, go to the cinema, play computer games or use gaming consoles, listen to music, and socialize. It is not that different from now, except we have smartphones and spend less time in the real world. Story 63. Play outside. Yes, at age 15 I still played. I also enjoyed reading comics, helping my parents, watching TV, and listening to music. Story 64. Playing basketball at a friend's house. Exploring the woods behind the local shopping center, playing video games, and hanging out in the Taco Bell parking lot. Story 65. Play on the computer with games like Chips Challenge, Frogger He's Back, Jumpstart, Clue Finders, and Freddy Fish. Go online to play games on sites like Free Arcade and RuneScape. Play outside with the neighborhood kids. We lived in a cul-de-sac, where we played kickball, baseball, basketball, manhunt and capture the flag, ride bikes, play video games, go swimming at a friend's pool, collect and trade Pokemon cards. Story 66. In the early 1990s, I played Doom and Doom 2 on the computer, attended underground house parties, and restocked the supply of condoms. Story 67. I grabbed an extra-large stuffed crust pizza and a 2-liter bottle of wild cherry Pepsi for less than $10. Then I biked to Tyler's place and played GoldenEye until everyone passed out. Story 68. I walked or biked to friends' houses and just hung out for hours. Eventually, it turned into trying to find places to get cigarettes, drugs, or alcohol, or to meet up with girls, but being broke made both of those pretty hard. Story 69. Explored the wooded areas around our house. Built forts. Played law enforcement and criminals. Got into mischief. Story 70. Surfing, skateboarding, snow skiing, and hanging out on the beach in Southern California offered an abundance of activities. Story 71. What are you, my dad? Quit hassling me. We're just hanging out. Okay? I don't know what you want to hear. Why do you want to control everything I do? I can't wait to get out of this place. As soon as I'm 18, I'm gone. Story 72. I brought my Nintendo 64 controller to a friend's house. We went to Blockbuster to browse and buy candy. Then we played laser tag and hung out at the mall, visiting KB Toys and EB Games. Story 73. Play video games. The mall arcades. I worked so I could buy a Neo Geo and a Turbo Duo. I annoyed girls by calling them repeatedly. Activities like that. Story 74. The same activities are done as before. Playing video games, reading, going outside, walking, hiking, participating in sports, visiting the mall, biking, watching television, smoking, drinking, and more. People now spend more time on their computers and phones, which is the main difference. Story 75. Ride bikes until I got my license, play video games, participate in sports, read, watch movies, explore the woods, browse the internet, and socialize. It was much better. I told my daughter the other day, imagine all the time you would have if you didn't have that phone, or if the only television in the house was 19 inches and located in the living room with only 3 channels. What would you do with all that? She thought about it and was kind of blown away by the idea. Story 76. Play football or basketball. Ride bikes. Hang out or just relax. Play video games. Watch television. Play tabletop games at the Games Workshop store. Story 77. Ride bikes. Visit the creek. Wrestle in the yard. Catch snakes. Watch movies. Go to the mall. And play video games. Story 78. I would build ramps as high as I could to see how high I could go without landing hard on the wheels. I ended up bending the handlebars until I decided to add a ramp on the other side to soften my landing. Story 79. Some people in my friend group hyped up a spot under a bridge, as if it were the coolest meeting place ever. I think I went there once, and it was really disappointing. I believe we still had a decent mall back then, and we probably went there. I can't remember exactly what we did. We just walked around feeling cool. Story 80. Made drinks in the woods. Local area network parties. Went hunting by riding my bike with a rifle rack on the handlebars to the state lands. Cow tipping. Drinking in a cornfield. Bonfires. Built items or tuned cars. Story 81. I went outside and spent time with friends. We skateboarded, rode bikes, and interacted with our surroundings. During my teenage years in the 2000s, I built forts and skateboarded everywhere, jumping my bike off dirt trails. Story 82. I used to be bored. Now we just go on our phones. I genuinely miss just being bored and having nothing to do sometimes. Story 83. Explore the town, spend time with one another, watch movies, and play video games. During the summer, we were outside until after sundown every day. Story 84. I was allegedly offered free drugs and alcohol. I am a few decades removed from high school, and I am still waiting for my free opportunity to get hooked. Story 85. I had friends over to play Axis and Allies or poker. We played tennis, racquetball, and basketball. I went to the gym for weightlifting and participated in Nintendo Tecmo Bowl tournaments. I skied all day in the winter. My Saturdays were spent working at Burger King just to afford skiing on Sundays. In the summer, I enjoyed sailing my little 2-person catamaran and going to a friend's cabin for water skiing or tubing. As I got older, I sometimes attended parties and drank in the woods when we had the chance, but those were special occasions. Story 86. I played Nintendo, Sega, and Super Nintendo. I rented movies and games, drove around town, and mostly just hung out with friends, walking to different houses. I was pretty young in the 1990s, but that's what we did. Story 87. Arcades, bike riding, martial arts, and boxing lessons. I got my first job at 16 and spent a lot of time with friends. Story 88. Play video games, skip school, skateboard, use drugs, and drive around getting into some trouble. It is pretty much the same things kids do nowadays, just with less connectivity and fewer consequences. Story 89. Ride a bike. Play sports and games with friends or kids from the neighborhood. Watch television. Spend time with family, including family game nights like Uno and attending baseball games. My parents were divorced, so I usually spent most weekends visiting the other side of the family. We stayed busy and active. The neighbor had a pool table in the basement, so we played pool as well. I lived in a beach town, so many kids went to the beach or the boardwalk. Story 90. I played a bit of Super Nintendo. I played music with my friends and watched the X-Files. I took walks in the park. It was a very social time, and I loved every minute. Story 91. Ride bikes, play basketball and baseball games in the neighborhood, skateboard, play hacky sack, have BB gun wars, ride to Blockbuster to rent horror movies, look for adult magazines in the woods, play Zelda, and start a garage band. Story 92. As we got older, we worked summer jobs, searched for gas money, found rides to the beach, went to the $2 old movie theater, went bowling, visited the old drive-in movie theater, and had unofficial drumline practices in comedy or dance clubs for those over 18. Story 93. Ride bikes and go to the mall with an arcade. Just hang out in parks and go to movies. Friday night was when you would go to the video rental store to get movies as well. Story 94. Ride a bike and hang out with friends. Play football or soccer in a field. Climb trees, play video games, or go to the mall, whether by walking or getting a parent to drive you. Discuss the girls you didn't actually go out with and weren't sure how to talk to. Story 95. I graduated in the early 90s from high school. I played video games, attended concerts, worked on my computer, and sought out as much cannabis as I could find. I also spent my additional spare time trying to locate more cannabis. Story 96. We used to cruise Main Street or rent a video and gather at someone's house to watch a movie. We all loaded into one car and went to a video rental store to decide as a group what we wanted to watch. Sometimes there would be a gathering in the mountains or a random cornfield, depending on what part of the country you're from. Story 97. World Wildlife Fund, Nintendo 64, Burger King, horror movies, smoke marijuana, bike ride, go fishing, draw, CDs, adult films, Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Pepsi Points. Story 98. I spent a lot of time gaming in the early 1990s and biking, but since I lived in a disadvantaged area, I also spent a good amount of time hanging around on street corners. We played Rounders and Manhunt, and we had a ball game called Squares that was very popular. Unfortunately, from 1993 onward, we got involved with hard drugs. Story 99. I wasn't a teenager in the 1990s, but I remember that teenagers mostly hung out at the skate park and made fun of me. Story 100. We would take our bikes apart and put them back together frequently. We felt like teenage super mechanics and then rode all day. Story 101. As a teenager from the 1990s, we would drive around town aimlessly, hang out at the mall for hours, go to the movies frequently, and spend time at each other's houses. Story 102. Talk on the phone, visit friends' houses, go camping, ride bikes, and browse the internet. Story 103. We played Jason Chase. We had a hockey mask, and my little brother would chase and scare us through the tiny alley between the houses. We ran all over the neighborhood being imaginative kids. Story 104. We used to drink a lot. Looking back, that behavior was pretty destructive. There wasn't much for teens to do around here, and the culture revolved around getting drunk. Teens in the Troubles era of Northern Ireland were a different breed. Story 105. Hang out with friends, go for a walk, talk on the phone, visit family, read a book, paint or draw, listen to music, go to the movies, go to the gym, swim, or ride a bicycle. Watch TV. Story 106. Hobbies like art, music, sports, fishing, and movies, as well as spending time with friends doing all kinds of silly things that we can all laugh about now. I think most experiences were in-person and tangible. Story 107. A lot of time spent in groups talking casually is reminiscent of Jay and Silent Bob in Clerks. It's surprising how much time was spent discussing myths, rumors, and debates about various topics or hobbies. Since anything can be looked up and verified on a smartphone, a significant amount of casual conversation has diminished. Story 108. I ride bicycles in our mountain province. I remember cycling with my cousins, and I laughed so hard at their jokes that I almost fell off a small cliff. Story 109. Riding my bike, practicing skateboarding in the park, and playfully causing mischief by decorating houses with toilet paper. Getting the neighbors to yell at us to get off their lawns. Going to the arcade and spending all the money we received as an allowance. We dressed like Wayne and Garth. Excellent. Good times. Story 110. Read books, visit music stores, ride bikes, and spend time at the mall. I may sound old-fashioned, but life was better when you were truly present with others. Story 111. Collect pogs, record music from the radio, ride bikes, read books, search for friends, cruise, visit the mall, play video games, seek out obscure movies, go thrift shopping, and hang out at our friend's workplace. Story 112. We would go to the mall. I loved the bookstore. On weekends, we visited movie theaters. We would cruise a popular street to meet girls, but I don't recall that ever actually happening. I also played 2 varsity sports, which took up a lot of time, around 15 to 25 hours a week. Story 113. Fought and drank until we had alcohol poisoning, believing we were dying in the middle of the woods. We set things on fire, jumped off roofs, climbed trees, and rode bikes. Story 114. Remember when rollerblades came out? Skateboarders disliked rollerbladers. I was a skater kid, and if you rollerbladed in the 1990s, you were generally not invited to skate parks. Personally, I thought both were cool. Story 115. We rode around in our cars because gas was 98 cents in the summer of 1999 when I graduated. We would park in the woods to hang out, smoke a lot of cannabis, listen to music, and play video games. We had real conversations that lasted for hours instead of minutes. We watched the same DVDs repeatedly because there was no Netflix or streaming. We attended fun, carefree, and affordable raves. Story 116. Ride bikes, play video games, play manhunt, prank call people, and make mixtapes. In my later teenage years, I smoked marijuana and continued to prank call people. That was really fun. Story 117. Bike to a friend's house, bike to rent a video game, stop at the convenience store for snacks, and play games until we got headaches or had massive amounts of Dungeons and Dragons. Story 118. When I was in my early teens, I went out on fun, though quite dangerous, bike rides. I then ended up spending too much time collecting and painting miniatures and playing computer games until I was able to be served in pubs at about age 16. I looked 12, but the laws were not as strictly enforced back then. Story 119. During the summer, the neighborhood pool was integral to life. All adventures began at the pool, which was the agreed meeting place. Sometimes we would spend all day there, and other times we would go somewhere else, but usually ended up back at the pool to play volleyball all night. Sleepovers were common. It was rare for anyone to sleep at their own house on a Friday night unless they were hosting. We rode bikes everywhere. Even in a busy city like Houston, I rode my bike a few miles to work, school, friends' houses, and the pool. The mall was important, as were movie theaters, especially the Dollar Theater. We would buy a $1 ticket and then move from one movie to the next without needing another ticket. We created our own games. I remember one year when we held neighborhood versions of the Olympics. We played street hockey on rollerblades, skated at the roller rink, built bike ramps, and played backyard baseball. We had fun. I don't recall ever really being bored, even without cell phones or the internet. Story 120. I looked for magazines in the woods. The train station was the preferred spot. I'll never forget the time I was riding my bike and saw a collection scattered along the road. My dad eventually found them, and it took a long time for him to believe that I actually found them in the middle of the street. Story 121. I grew up in a small town in a rural area in the Midwest, so I spent my time hunting, fishing, riding my bike, drawing, and after I turned 16, driving back roads and exploring. Story 122. I played outside with friends as a young teenager. Once we got our licenses, we drove wherever we could. We hung out at Walmart, got fast food, parked, and talked while eating. We sat around and listened to music. Those were simpler times. Story 123. I personally played Sega Genesis, Sega CD, and Super Nintendo in the early 1990s, PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and Nintendo 64 in the mid-1990s, and Dreamcast in the late 1990s. I also surfed the internet occasionally in the early 1990s and watched my mom talk to people in chat rooms. I sifted through some channels on America Online at my aunt's house. In the late 1990s, I had a phone line in my room, so I used to get on the internet frequently. I would look up cheats, tips, and tricks for all the games I had, and I'd get online with my Dreamcast to download game saves. I also searched for adult content often. Story 124. I was 16 in 1980, and we had a blast. Being from a small rural town, we would hang out in each other's workshops, fixing up old beater cars that we paid $100 for. We would happily help out at a friend's farm. No farmer would ever turn down free labor from a bunch of strong young teenagers. Their mothers would feed us dinner, and then we would go party in a field or a pit. Everyone from our town and the neighboring towns would be there, with music blasting, a band playing, a big bonfire, weed, and beer. There was nothing better than a pit party or a field party, and we would somehow make it back to the farm for 4 a.m. milking. We had dirt bikes or snowmobiles in the winter and would be gone for hours. God only knows where we were. We would go to a lake, set up camp, fish, swim, and sit around the campfire, talking about our dreams and aspirations. If we were lucky, we had a girl with us. If not, well, whatever. We had it pretty good. Our parents had no clue where we were or what we were doing. As long as the police didn't show up at the front door, it was all good. Story 125. On school days in the evening, I had a job where I worked from 4 to 7. When I got home, I would eat, watch television, do homework, and go to bed. On Fridays, I would hang out at one of my friends' houses, go to a movie, or sometimes we would just drive around or watch a film with a group of friends at a friend's house. On Saturdays, I sometimes had soccer games or tournaments, or I would work. I played golf from a young age, so sometimes a couple of friends and I would go to the local municipal course and play around. After I got my license, we would sometimes, if the weather was warm, go out of town, gather a couple of dead cedar trees, and have a bonfire where we would listen to music, talk, and tell jokes. We did this more often in the summer. We also played cooperative games like GoldenEye. So basically, I hung out with friends, worked, and went to school. I worked from the time I was 15 and participated in school sports to a minor degree, as I was never on the varsity football team. Story 126. Hang out, play games, and listen to music. Enjoy after-school sports. Similar yet different. No social media simply means there isn't an ongoing record of everything we ever did. Story 127. Video games, Nintendo, and Sega were popular in the 1990s, along with personal computer gaming starting to gain traction. Most of us were latchkey kids with no parents available until 5 or 6 p.m., but we got home at 3:30 p.m. In the evenings, there were no cell phones to reach us. Cruising involved going to a high-traffic area in the city in one or more cars packed with friends. We would stop and hang out in the parking lots of stores or food joints, then drive to the next hotspot a bit later. We would shout or honk at other cars, start confrontations, flirt, and generally be reckless teenagers. Everyone participated in one or more sports. Since people spent time outdoors, it was easy to organize pickup football or baseball games in the neighborhood. Story 128. I spent a lot of time outside or at shopping malls. I was a big rollerblader back then and still love playing roller hockey. Story 129. You went outside to your friend's house, or you stayed inside and played video games and watched cable television. Story 130. Sex, bikes, drugs, video games, internet, phone calls, hikes, building things. You could be foolish and no one would record it. For example, this was unwise and ignorant of me, but I used to remove the metal benches from the cement at our mall's bus stop and carry them up a hill. Then my friends and I would steal golf balls from a nearby range and throw them at the bus stop when no one was around, while seated on our bench, of course. Story 131. Out roaming the streets, listening to music, riding my bike anywhere, meeting at the park or mall, reading, and daydreaming. Avoid white vans. Story 132. Play Nintendo 64, watch VHS tapes of movies recorded from television, and hang out for hours on random benches. Story 133. I was in high school until 1993, so I spent my time studying, listening to music, playing Nintendo, and reading books. I also participated in Boy Scouts, which included camping. Story 134. I played my Sega, had an Apple computer, and an old Commodore 64, which I learned to code on. I enjoy making things out of other materials. Oddly, I did have a girlfriend, though in those days that just meant seeing each other and making out, then walking her to the bus stop. No one had money for dates like you see on TV. That's Fantasyland. It was either at your house, her house, or you had a spot outside somewhere. I would sit in places with friends. If we had money, we would buy something. If not, we would shoplift. I was not poor. This is just how it was. Parents did not often hand over money. I had Game Boys and Segas, but never a Nintendo because I was not a fan. I did have an Atari and a television that were handed down to me. So, I had cool things, I just didn't have money. I smoked marijuana and drank since around age 14, which is normal for many. I was half country boy, half city raised. The city brought more trouble while the country had fewer girls. So, the city wins. Story 135. Loitering around, visiting friends, playing pool at our local shopping center, playing video games at our friends' houses, enjoying video games at the arcade, playing card games, engaging in board games, playing soccer, basketball, approaching girls, watching movies on VCR players, and going to the cinema. Story 136. Video games were my main interest. Spending time with friends was enjoyable as well. Television and movies were also part of my leisure activities. Although I had no experience with it, dating was popular among others. Story 137. Get into trouble. Go to shows. Get in the mosh pit. Graffiti, party, chase girls, ride bikes, and hang out with friends at the mall or someone's house. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.